Right, I've got another Volvo man in the car here. Basically, for me, sunroof, heated seats, beige interior, estate, that's the dream. But at the minute, I've got an estate that's got a sunroof that's got a dark interior. I've got an estate that's an automatic that's got a beige interior. Neither of those have got an MOT. And I've got another estate that's on the way with a grey interior. They're all diesels, but none of them are quite ready. So my plan is to get all 3 diesel estate cars in a yard with my tools and build one that works for me and sell the rest.
Good plan.
But none of them are ULEZ compliant. Introduce yourself, Pete.
I'm Pete. I'm an anti-ULEZ protester, I suppose you'd say, or activist, or whatever you want to call me. Basically, I'm against Sadiq Khan's tax against the poor. Anyone that chooses to use an older car that's non-compliant in TfL's eyes, on what's going on in London, really, that's then moving across the country.
I do think we should start calling these low emission zones low poor people zones, because that's exactly what they are. In China, they are now using a system whereby they will find menial ways to fine you when you're out on your scooter, and then they will take your scooter off you, forcing you to go out and buy a new one, which drives the economy. And I believe that the ULEZ is functioning in the exact same way under the guise, or myth, as you could call it, the myth of clean air.
Exactly. It's a promise that it's not delivering. No one can prove that by paying this £12.50 it does anything to clean up the air, because it doesn't. They're claiming that the aim is to encourage people to buy a new car. Well, it's not encouraging people. If they, I mean, I know of people that they've got work vehicles that they are specific to their job. They're set up as to what they need. They can't even consider going out and buying a new one. The money that they'd need to invest or get loans for, and even these people, they've applied for the scrappage scheme. So they should be eligible. They're a small business, they're either self-employed, they live in the zone, because that's the next thing. If you're just outside the zone, but let's say your catchment area for your work crosses a border that it's invisible, it previously didn't exist a few months ago, back in August, you could have driven freely around, gone about your daily business, gone about your job, and not had to worry about whether you're going to be charged £12.50. They have been, I know one example where they've been turned down 9 times for the business ultra low emission zone money grant from Sadiq Khan. Other people that they've been turned down, I think one bloke was turned down 3 or 4 times. He eventually got the scrappage scheme money, but each time it came back with a different answer as to why it wasn't being given to him. And it was rubbish. It was things like your insurance document, your name doesn't match your business name, or this doesn't add up, or we couldn't find this part of it. And it's just any excuse. I mean, all of the propaganda about you're eligible, and he made it open to more people, but a lot of people have already scrapped their cars by this point.
Notwithstanding the fact that the scrappage scheme itself was rubbish from the start. This is one of the first videos that started to grow my channel when I read about that scrappage scheme. And I went, this is terrible in every way. The science that the clean air zones are based on is terrible. The science of the old cars being taken off the road thing is terrible. The fact that we've just had a chat with Chris at the dyno, who's running a 500 horsepower V8 Range Rover that does 9 miles to the gallon, he can drive in the zone, but I can't take my 50 miles to the gallon 30-year-old diesel Volvo into the zone. All of it from top to bottom is made up balls.
100%.
But the problem that we've got, and the problem you've had recently, the people that are standing up for freedom, I'm going to say, the people that are standing up for our right to drive and own old cars, the people that are standing up for poorer people that don't want to replace their old car, why should you be forced to replace your car?
Exactly, that should be a choice that you make as a decision when you are financially able to. If you want to, I mean, you and myself, we both choose to drive these cars because they're simple to fix, you can get parts for them, you can do it yourself.
And they make us happy. Let's talk about it at its most simple level. My Volvo makes me quite happy.
100%. Yet we're being told, no, you've got to go and buy this newer, cleaner car, which is all flawed, because it may be zero emissions at the tailpipe if it's a fully electric car, but the damage to the environment, I mean, the cobalt mining and the lithium mining and things that have gone on abroad that no one's seen here
before it's even shipped over to us. It's ludicrous. It is a tax on poor people. They don't want us driving around in cars that we already own and that we afford. And I get really vocal about it because it is as simple as that. This car is paid for. I don't know anyone any money for this car, and they don't want us to drive around in cars that we can afford. It really is as simple as that. But what we've come here to speak about today is the stuff that you've had to deal with at the latest ULEZ protest, which many people may not have heard about because it didn't make the news. I saw a lot of it shared in a lot of the groups. It wasn't picked up by the mainstream media, but let me tell the people what I think happened, and then you can fill us in on the true details. As I understand it, there was an anti-ULEZ protest. There was a train. There was a not huge number of people there. We're not talking thousands and thousands of people.
Probably less than 100.
Less than 100 people. We then had what I can only describe as an entire army, a cohort of policemen primarily, that went running in, and I believe that they were told from on high to crush, destroy the protest, and people were humiliated, injured, arrested. And just quickly before I let you do your bit, we've never seen that at a Just Stop Oil protest. We've never seen that at any of the climate protests. No police have gone in and crushed a protest like what we saw this time. Something has changed in the narrative from up top that said go in and destroy these guys. Right, over to you. That's my bit done. You tell us what's going on.
Well, thanks, Geoff. It's so obviously I've been in rooms where Sadiq Khan has addressed the public and said that he defends their right to peaceful protest as long as it's within the law and it's peaceful. He thinks that it's fine and that people should be doing this, and he actually encouraged the person that was asking the question that you and your friends should go out and protest, but no one's listening to the people. So peaceful protest gets ignored. It doesn't even make the mainstream media most of the time. I mean, the early protests in Trafalgar Square and places in London, you'd get a snippet in an online article. Nothing in the sort of mainstream news, the media, in all the build-up to the expansion of the ULEZ. And then basically went to the Tooting area of London. So he's been branded Putin from Tooting.
Putin from Tooting.
Because the dictatorship that's being run in London, the police were pre-aware. They knew what was going on. There wasn't an approach where it's not proportional to the risk. The people that we're talking about, they're every day.
I've said this on my channel before. The people that are protesting against the ULEZ are normal human beings. A while ago, going back more than a year, I read a letter on my channel from a pensioner who was writing to Sadiq Khan publicly just to say, you're stopping me from seeing my elderly sister. You're stopping me from caring for my family. It's normal people who are coming out to these protests
100%.
Who just don't want to have their lives impacted.
Exactly. I mean, when you're there, I mean, I now know so many of the people personally. They're not just a face. I know their story. I know that there's people that can't care for their elderly parents. Between them and their sister, they would go every other day. So they'd alternate. Now they have to pick which day of the week they go and who's going to go next and how much it's going to cost them. It's just not fair.
The true impact that this is having on people's livelihoods, lives,
mental health
is gigantic, and there are people whose lives have been destroyed by these fines. We keep seeing these stories pop up in the ULEZ group because that's really the only place you see them. They never make the mainstream media. You'll never hear in the mainstream media that Albert, or whatever his name was, who's 74, has had the bailiffs go in his house and pretty much take all his stuff, take everything over a made-up fine based on made-up science. People's lives are being destroyed by this, and it's not making the mainstream media.
With a zone that the signage isn't fit for purpose.
No.
It's not a physical barrier that you can drive up to and someone says, excuse me, you can't come in here because you don't comply, and you go, oh, sorry, I wasn't aware. This is, you cross something, the first you hear of it might be a few weeks later when you get a fine in the post, or a penalty charge notice, which is demanding money.
But you showed me one on your phone earlier, which is a vehicle driving into a made-up zone where made-up science applies, driving past an invisible threshold 4 times, which has resulted in, what was it, £1,700?
It's 5 fines for £1,770. And I think that's before the fees that have been put on it by the debt collectors.
Yeah.
And so people have got debt collectors turn up at their door when all they're doing is going to work, going to school, taking their children to school, going to hospital appointments and things like this. This shows just how uncaring the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is, in as much as the Royal Marsden Cancer Hospital, you look at the zone and the map, it comes out to encompass the hospital. The same with the Harefield Hospital on the west side of London, so the Uxbridge area. You actually look at the map and it comes out and round it. You've got crematoriums right on the border, they're in the zone. It's just completely uncaring. You can't expect everyday normal people to put up with this sort of thing. But
train. We came out here to find a quiet spot to film and we're on a train line.
Can't make it up.
You can't make it up.
So at the weekend, the people that are there, they are everyday normal people. There's elderly people, there's just every walk of life is there. Other than, let's say, the youngest members of society. I mean, I'm probably one of the younger people there.
Yeah.
And this is because a lot of youngsters now, they're being priced out of driving.
Oh, they can't afford to drive.
You can't afford to insure your car, you can't afford to run it on the fuel. There's so many other things that, I mean, if they're looking to buy a compliant car to drive in London so they get charged £12.50 a day, it's just not viable for them.
Your cheapest compliant car is an old petrol.
Yeah.
But youngsters can't insure an old petrol.
No.
Because they'll have larger engines.
Exactly.
And I was saying this on a podcast yesterday with James Rupert. We're seeing now insurance quotes of £5,000 and upward for people. Yeah. Now, if you're a youngster, you're probably on minimum wage. You can't afford £500 a month to insure your car. Who can afford that? That's on top of your rent, which has gone up anyway. Yep. And then the fact that the price of cars has gone up. You can't buy a car with an MOT for 500 quid anymore. So the reason the young people aren't at the protests is because they're not affected by it, because they've already been priced off the road before they've even started. Exactly. So we've got a whole generation of people that are not independently mobile.
They haven't got the freedoms that we experienced growing up.
And they don't know it.
No, that's it. They're conditioned now that if they want to go somewhere, they have to get on public transport. Whereas when I passed my test, I can remember it gave me freedom. I was able to travel the country. I participated in a sport that I needed to travel the country, and it gave me independence. It taught me a lot of life lessons, being on my own, driving. It gave me a good experience, whereas there's now people that they don't leave an area.
Those car keys, when you get them, when you pass your test, that's your access to the rest of your life.
Definitely.
And that's what people don't get.
No. And I mean, we do get a lot of people, when you're protesting, they still don't even know what ULEZ stands for. They don't know what that acronym or those letters mean. And they'll sort of say, oh, what does ULEZ mean? And you start explaining, we see these cameras up here that are looking all the time, 24/7, they are monitoring everyone's movements in their car, that they are just charging people to drive off their driveway in a car that they've now been deemed. I mean, it's passed an MOT.
Yeah.
So it's satisfied the emissions standard for an MOT. Yet suddenly the Mayor of London, who wants his money because he's not getting it, he claims he'll blame the government for everything. Anything that he can pass on to being the government's fault, he'll sit there and blame. So the government for this, the government for that. He can get this money direct to him due to his devolved powers being in the GLA. He's got too much power for one man in London. The government supposedly can't even stop him from doing what he's doing.
They're playing a very clever game, because what we've got, before we get on to what happened with the protests, is we have a Conservative government and a Labour mayor. The Labour mayor has the power, and the Conservative government claim that they haven't got the power to stop him. Notwithstanding that, as I've proven on my C40 Cities video, Sadiq Khan is the chairman of an organisation called C40 Cities, which is a collection of mayors from all around the world, and the primary funder of C40 Cities is the UK government. So they're pretending that they can't stop him whilst funding him at the same time. It's all a charade.
100%.
Or a charade. Is it a charade or a charade? It's a scam, isn't it? Let's just call it a scam. 4 letters, simple as that. It's a scam, isn't it?
Simplify it.
Yeah.
This is the thing. It's Punch and Judy politics.
It is.
That they're sat there, one's arguing, and I mean, Sadiq Khan, his favourite thing to do in the GLA is run the clock down.
Yeah.
So they try to put a question to him. He'll sit there, he'll mock people, he'll pretend to be difficult, and he'll just sit there point blank refusing to answer questions. I've seen it in person.
It's hideous to watch because it makes your skin crawl.
It does.
Because here we have someone who is a devious, manipulative, nasty piece of work. 100%. When you watch him on camera, it comes across, this is not a nice human being.
He's enjoying it.
And he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
But he's been put there for a reason. I'm not going to go down the conspiracy route because I don't want to talk about that today. But when you watch the interviews with Sadiq Khan, and, you know, one of my most watched videos is it's not my footage, and I never claimed that it was. It's not a monetized video, but it's just a simple video of Sadiq Khan coming out of a meeting and one of his constituents, someone that lives in that area, trying to talk to him. You've seen the video. Everyone's seen the video. And Sadiq Khan has his bodyguards, and his bodyguards basically stop this guy from getting near him, and Sadiq Khan gets in his £400,000 armoured V8 powered Range Rover, and will not talk to the guy who's a cyclist. The guy's a cyclist.
You'd think that he'd want to talk to someone that might be on side.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, he cannot now attend any events where anyone knows he's going. He cannot attend events where they haven't pre-vetted the audience so that they're his supporters, which they've got to be brainwashed to be there to start with.
If you got to a stage where you're the mayor and you can't go anywhere because your policies are so harmful, you can't risk yourself turning up at the event, it's time to have a look at who you are and what your policies are, because you're quite clearly not working on behalf of the people, and these people are meant to be working on our behalf.
Yeah, I mean, he's an elected official, so he should be representing the views of the people and at least listening to the people. The consultations that happened pre-ULEZ expansion, it was an overwhelming majority of people, and businesses was an even greater figure, that said they didn't want the ULEZ expansion.
I've ranted about this on so many videos. They did the consultations and the people said no. They consulted the businesses and the people said no, and they did it anyway.
Exactly. It was always going to happen. So we've been told that peaceful protest, lawful, that's your right, you do it. That's your way to protest. He doesn't like the Blade Runner movement, absolutely hates the fact that cameras are being taken down. It's costing TfL an untold figure in putting this right. But his way is, no, you must peaceful protest.
So let's just look at that for a second, right? You filled in your consultation and you said you don't want the ULEZ. You own a business, you filled in the consultation and you said you don't want the ULEZ. They put the ULEZ in. You wrote to your MP, you said we've got problems with the ULEZ. You wrote to Sadiq Khan, you said we've got problems with the ULEZ. You attended the protests to show that you got problems with the ULEZ, and then you attended the latest protest and the police came in extremely heavy-handedly and beat you up. So what do you have left lawfully to use as your... How can you protest against that?
You're being silenced at that point, in as much as the mainstream media, the only places that I've seen this was in the Telegraph and the Daily Mail. And I think they're both online articles. There's nothing in print as far as we're aware. Nothing on the mainstream news. And this was... this is no exaggeration. There were over 200 police there. Met Police were sent. They'd lined up.
Hang on, slow it down then. Talk us through the day. So, where's the protest? This is Trafalgar Square.
No, this is in Tooting.
Tooting. So it's a protest in Tooting, organised by one of the anti-ULEZ groups, and you've got how many people there?
It was less than 100. It was.
I looked at the photos, and it's not huge. There's more police there than there are people.
It was. I think. So throughout the years, since the ULEZ expansion came in, the protests have ramped up because we're running out of time. The mayoral elections are on the 2nd of May. And people in London that get a vote have got to vote for anyone other than Sadiq Khan. It's got to be done. That people he's a celebrity, and a lot of people are going to vote just because he's a celebrity. They don't even know what his policies are, but they recognise him. If they don't recognise the other candidates, they won't vote for them. And that's a major danger. And you've also got the fact that people don't turn out to vote. There's this voter apathy that, oh, well, what difference is it going to make? He's going to get in anyway. But if you don't go and you don't represent people in big numbers, it's going to happen again, and then you've got no right to complain.
The other two elephants in the room there are religion and racism, and I'm not going to talk about either of them.
No, but he does hide behind it a lot.
He hides behind the religion thing, and I pretty much firmly believe that Sadiq Khan is anti-British, anti-white. Can you even say that? And we touched on the edge of what can and can't be said here, but it's all there between the lines. It's all there just behind what's going on.
I mean, the way in which he puts forward his argument is always the fact that it's because of his race, his religion. It wouldn't matter who or what he is. He's not a nice person. What he's
nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
It's not. We don't even think that you can class him as a man, for the fact that you can't imagine that what you're doing is right. When you actually hear genuine stories of people either financially burdened,
emotionally, mentally,
you'd have to have some sort of empathy in you to understand that this isn't the right policy. There are other ways of doing this, but it all comes down to the money and the control, putting the camera system in. So, as we say, less than 100 protesters there. It was due to start at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and it would finish at 3. So all the different protests, as I say, they've been ramped up to the point at which there's now sometimes one on a Saturday and one on a Sunday, different locations, been all over London. So North, Enfield, right down in sort of Carshalton, all the different places. And the one that happens to be in Tooting has a huge, and I mean huge, police presence turn up. And I mean, normally you might get a couple of police officers come by, see what's going on. There's a lot of support with people blowing their horns, so they'll be tooting as they go past because they've seen the placards, they understand. They might not necessarily be a non-compliant vehicle. The amount of vehicles that we get support from that are Teslas, electric vehicles, hybrids. I've spoken to people in hybrids and sort of said, you're tooting, what's your support reason? Surely you're compliant and you don't care. And they go, no, I was forced to buy this car to carry on with my taxi business, or I was forced to buy it because I was told I'd have to pay if I didn't. They can understand the reasoning, but they've complied. So we turn up, there's less than 100 people, and instantly the local police were fine. They were talking to people, mingling, it was the usual sort of atmosphere. And then suddenly they realised that there is a huge police presence. There were van loads of police, and a couple of the protesters were able to see where they were and that they were forming a line, and peacefully, this is genuine, they were peacefully walking around filming. So they've just got their phone, they're walking around in amongst the police, and there was all this talk of Section 42, which it comes down to a law that the police can enforce with regards to, they claim intimidation of a person in their home if they are present. Now, the location is supposedly near Sadiq Khan's house, and we're not sure whether he was present or not. And if he wasn't, then this Section 42 isn't even valid, because if he wasn't there to be intimidated and no one was intimidating him, it's a jumped up reason to disband or stop the protest, and it was peaceful. They spoke to people that had some sort of authority or run some of the groups, but no one was actually in charge, because people are their own people. They've turned up to a protest to voice their opinion, and none of them are going to be told you've got to go home by someone else that claims to be in charge. So they were able to suggest, right, we've been told by the police this is what's going on. If you want to stay, you can stay, but we're all peaceful. We want to be here till 3 o'clock. And the police came backwards and forwards, and they kept coming back with different reasons. So one minute it was that the businesses were upset. And I know people that have actually been in the businesses around that junction. So it was on a crossroads. And most of the businesses were giving them the sob stories of how they have been affected, and explaining the fact that it's not just affected their business, it's affected their private lives, their own transport, their own families. If it's not them, it's their friends. They've seen a tail off in business and custom to their shops. A lot of places, if you can imagine you're very near a border and you've got a shop that's just into the zone, are you going to add £12.50 to your trip, or are you going to travel 15 minutes the other way, creating more pollution,
100%.
or more traffic, to go where you don't pay £12.50?
You shop elsewhere.
You shop elsewhere. And so anyone just inside the border of the zone has noticed a massive tail. I mean, we've been to protests where there's shops that have now actually shut, businesses that have had to give up and say, we can't pay the rent, footfall's dropped off, we can't make ends meet. So those businesses were not a valid reason. There was no one complaining that we're aware of, and people actually said, well, who's complaining? And no one could give an answer. It then came back as it was residents. And then it's obviously the main reason is Sadiq Khan, somewhere along the line, has said, I don't want this on my patch. This is too close to me. He is obviously in charge of the Metropolitan Police Force. So if there was a problem, why was it not the local police dealing with it? Why have the Met Police been brought in their droves? There's one shot where someone walks around the corner and there are 15 police officers lined up in high vis, and they're not in riot gear, but they're looking ready to pounce.
They're ready to go.
And that's just one part of the junction. There were, I think, some people walking around video, and they were counting, and they were going 2, 4, 6, 8, and they were losing count. By the time they were getting sort of halfway down a queue of officers lined up, there were 20 or 30 in a row, and they suddenly changed, and they formed a line across the road. And at that point, one of the organisers of the main anti-ULEZ groups, so if anyone wants to look up the groups, they are Action Against ULEZ on Facebook, and you'll find War Against the Motorist and Action Against Unfair ULEZ and the nonsense with sort of low LTNs, clean air zones, all the rest of it. And those two groups are the ones to join. There are lots of other splinter groups that cover smaller areas in London, but he was actually led across the road. So he was just walking around filming. A police officer walks up to him and says, excuse me sir, can you walk across here? And that's to walk across the road straight towards an oncoming policewoman who announces that he's going to be under arrest. And he stands there saying, what for? And the next thing, I think it was 5 more officers around him, and they've grabbed him. His phone goes up in the air because he's trying to protect it, and he's still filming, and it lands on the floor. And he's then basically manhandled. He's an elderly gentleman. He's not someone that was causing a problem, but he's now been antagonised. He's feeling cornered. He's got officers all round him. And at that point, if you'd have got the wrong type of people, they might have mobbed the police, but they didn't. People shouted and were concerned for him and wanted to know that he was okay, but no one attacked any other officers. So why were more people then arrested? Someone else who was filming the arrest then got led away and arrested. So in that sense, there were people that were manhandled for not doing anything. The next person to be arrested was sat on the floor at the time. A woman, she sat on the floor. She's no threat to any of the officers. She wasn't doing anything wrong, and she'd actually been told that she would be allowed, once the police line had passed, to get to her car because it was parked the other side. And she'd spoken to one officer who said, once it's passed, we'll get some other officers and we'll walk you through to your car. A different officer came up to her. She was sat on the floor because a lot of the anti-ULEZ protests have taken on the dinosaur theme.
She was getting out of a dinosaur suit.
Exactly.
I saw it.
An inflatable dinosaur suit. She'd been wearing it sort of down around her waist once the tensions had grown and we'd been told to leave.
So she's on the floor getting changed.
She'd taken a boot off. She sat on the floor, and you can see, I know her. She's got a knee brace on. She's got a brace on her wrist and on her arm, and she suffers from arthritis. and she's sat on the floor to make sure that she can get out of her dinosaur suit. An officer comes over and goes, "You've got 3 seconds to get up or we'll arrest you." And she thinks that they're joking. And I think her response was something along the lines of, "I can't get off of a chair in 3 seconds."
Yeah.
And before she'd even finished saying it, they'd grabbed her. They'd got her arm.
Heavily,
exactly. She's got bruises all around her wrist. She's not any threat when she's sat on the floor. Yet they twist her arms behind her back and cuff her, and she's seen screaming. And other people, once again, it's a woman that they want to protect, but they know that they're upstanding members of society. They're not going to grab the police officers and start fighting with them, but they want to protect her. So one of the people that comes over to her is an elderly gentleman who has other serious health implications. He's got Parkinson's and he's got diabetes. He walks over with her dog to make sure that she's okay, and he gets arrested. An elderly man has his arm twisted up behind his back. He had the back of his hand clawed by the fingernails of one of the police officers, and he was bleeding. Now, with type 1 diabetes, that's not going to heal very quickly, and he didn't even get the medical attention that he needed once he was in custody. So he was no risk. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He's inquiring about his friend who's being cuffed on the floor, who's screaming out in pain because she's being hurt. Another man who he's got health conditions, he's got heart problems. He was concerned also for the lady on the floor. And as he's walking over to her, he's got his placard that he's had all day and at all of the other protests. And one of the senior officers screams at him, actually yells to put that down. So he stops and he's sort of thinking, well, what's he referring to? And of course realises, well, it's the placard, which is already down. It's not like he's waving it in the air, it's down. So he backs off and he's still yelling at him to put it down. And I mean, what's he meaning? Chuck it on the floor and walk away from it? And officers grab him, manhandle him round the corner, and the screams of the pain, you can see him lifted off the ground as they twist his arm behind his back.
Yeah.
And they don't stop at the point where he's in pain. They keep doing it. And then he ends up on the floor. He's in agony. Whether he had his shoulder dislocated or whatever, it was damaging.
Who are these cowards doing this?
Exactly. And I mean, he is a manual worker.
Yeah.
So his livelihood relies on his ability to be able to use his arms. And potentially someone's just injured him for what was he doing.
And then there's the bloke that runs in, and I'm sure I saw a woman get elbow to the face.
Yes, she was
punched in the face by elbow to the floor by what looked like a senior officer. Yes, it's potentially,
which
is when you get into this strange thing with this bronze
13
interesting departments of police. So I'll let you go on to that.
Well, the lady that was elbow to the floor has recently had spinal surgery.
Wow.
So she's been to protests. She's always at protests, and most of the time she'll be in a wheelchair because of the spinal surgery that she's recently had. If she's on her feet for too long, it hurts. She's in a lot of pain, and this was one of the first ones where she was actually walking around. To start with, the wheelchair was on the bus, so the Route Master bus that was there, and you can hear one of the people screaming out for them to get the wheelchair off the bus. When she's been knocked to the floor, she's sat there in pain. There's no compassion shown by any of the officers. They just, you actually watch one of them that's potentially responsible for that look down and step away. They know what they've done.
They know what they've done.
Yeah. And these are people that they're meant to be protecting society and the people, not injuring them and silencing them on the say-so of some orders from above, because that's what happened. This was, go away, we don't want you protesting here. Obviously there's a mayoral election coming up. It doesn't look good, does it?
Wow.
So at that stage, there were 5 people arrested. So early on, it was chaos because everyone was told to disband. the reason that the police line was formed was because the police issued the Section 42, which is to disperse and you've got to leave, and the suggestion they first made was to go to City Hall. Go and protest at City Hall. Well, have they ever tried to drive or get to City Hall? It's a nightmare getting around London anyway, due to the way that the traffic light system has been changed. It's the creation of traffic.
Oh yeah.
You cannot now, journeys that would have taken half the time they do now, some months ago or years ago during Sadiq Khan's reign of terror on London.
Deliberate destruction of London and the deliberate obstruction of London has been going well.
It's increased. He should be proud of himself if that's what he's aiming to achieve, because he's getting there.
Yeah.
And if he's allowed in for another 4 years, I dread to think what's going to happen.
Well, London under his tenure has turned into a dangerous third world slum.
Yes.
Essentially.
Knife crime, all the other crimes that he's been questioned in the GLA, and people like Neil Garrett have put the question to him, and Peter Fortune and various other Conservative members, where they've asked him, do you really believe that London is safer under your control?
Yeah.
Knife crimes up.
Well, there's the girl that was stabbed to death on a bus, and it turned out, it was reported in the early reports, that the reason she was on the bus was because of the ULEZ, because her parents didn't want to drive to school anymore.
That's right. And you've got to think of people that...
You won't find that, by the way, in the news.
No.
But it was in the early reports, and then it disappeared.
It often will. I mean, you've got to think of, let's say you're a nurse and you do a night shift. So if you drove in your car, you'd have to pay £12.50, and that stops at midnight.
Yep.
So then to go home, if your shift ends in the early hours of the morning, you're paying another £12.50. So your option is to be on public transport late at night as a lone female. This isn't making anyone feel safer.
No.
But also, in these outer boroughs where it's been extended to, the public transport links aren't the same as central London. You don't have the buses, the trains running all the time that take you exactly where you need to go. You'd get off of a bus a long way from potentially where your house is, and you've got to walk on your own at night instead of being able to be safely in your own personal private space in your car where you can lock the doors and feel safe.
It's a tax on the poor, because if you're a wealthy city trader driving into the city of London, then either you write it down as a tax deductible, your £12.50, or you buy yourself a compliant car. You buy yourself maybe an electric converted classic car for hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's disgusting.
It is. I mean, getting back to what happened, so the 5 people were arrested, and the reason being they told us to go to City Hall. Well, as it happened, there'd been a knife crime vigil at City Hall on the Friday, so only the day before. And I don't believe Sadiq Khan was even there. They wouldn't have seen anything. No one's going to be there on a Saturday. So, and the footfall around that area, first of all, it's a pedestrianised area right outside City Hall. And the rest of the area, it's not going to be passing traffic. The junction we were at, the support that you could hear from the horns, people understand it. So being told to go to City Hall was a no-go. And eventually the police sort of changed their mind and said, oh, well, you can go to the Common. Well, the Common is accessible down what road? The road where they blocked it off. And it was almost like it was a deliberate act to encourage people to mass migrate towards that area.
Yeah.
If they'd have looked on their phone and said, well, where's the Common? Oh, it's down that road there. They were encouraging them to walk by this house that is supposedly of interest.
Funneling. They were funneling people in a direction that they wanted them to go.
They were expecting
for whatever
trouble,
ends.
or they were trying to incite trouble.
They were trying to incite trouble.
And because they didn't get it, the people that were there filming and taking notice of what the police were doing got arrested. And whether that was to make the point that we can get this protest to go away, if we arrest the ringleaders or the people that are noticed or respected in the groups, then this will all go away. And I'll tell you now, it's not going to go away. Because
I don't think they wanted it to go away. It sounds to me like what they wanted was they wanted people to turn on the police.
Yeah.
So then they could get really serious. That sounds to me like they were poking a bear.
Very much so. But of course, they've got the wrong people. These aren't
violent
people. They're not. I mean, you've got elderly people, you've got people that have got disabilities, they're walking with sticks, or, I mean, they're just not those sort of people. You can always imagine that if they picked on the wrong person and pushed them hard enough, someone that feels threatened by the police mob-handed. But thankfully, that didn't happen because those just aren't the people that are involved.
Someone could have been killed. The police could have killed someone in that situation.
Exactly.
I've seen how heavy they went in on the videos.
It's to know how shaken up some of these people were, and talking to them now, they've gone through a range of emotions. So a lot of them they're actually, I mean, you call it post-traumatic stress syndrome that they're going to be suffering from, because now they're on edge. Noises, people, like, you've only got to see a group of police officers.
It's traumatising.
It is. It's going to be.
Which is why it's important that you've come out to see me today. You've driven a couple of hours to come and get this across to me, and we've managed to. I've had a crazy busy week, but we've managed to find a slot in Gloucester where we can sit down and have this chat, because it matters.
Really appreciate it.
But it matters.
It does. It is not being covered. People, the outer world, do not know about this.
No, they don't.
Because it's not being reported. So basically, the people were being told to go to the Common, and the only direct route down there would have been that road.
Yeah.
So then the police, I heard the Met Police on one of the videos saying, well, we're not from round here, we don't know, you'll have to work it out yourselves. So there were ways round. I'd walked round with others, and we took a wrong turn and ended up walking further than we needed to. And by the time we got there, a lot of people had assembled there. A lot of people had been lost. We were trying to work out, well, who's not here, who's been arrested. There was real concern for a couple of elderly ladies.
Yeah.
That this is how close-knit we all are. We're going, well, where's this person gone? Where's that person? Are they safe? And once we'd established that we'd got some links to them, or someone had rung them and they'd answered and said, yeah, I've gone home, or I wasn't there at all.
Yeah.
Or all the different things. And we'd sort of narrowed it down to, well, we're on for the belief there's 7 people that have been arrested.
Yeah.
As it turned out, it was 5. The other 2 that were actually taken in at the same time weren't anything to do with the anti-ULEZ protests. So, but the 5 people, once we'd worked out who they were, we needed to know where they'd gone. But while we're all assembled near the Common, the police started turning up again. So in each road from the side of it, there were 3 police vans in each one. So I could see 3 in one road, 3 in another, 3 up behind the bus, 3 down another road. They were closing in again. And it suddenly became that there was another Section 42 issued. You've got to disperse from this area. We don't want you here. What intimidation. And there was no chanting, no protesting, there was no noise being made.
By that point, it sounds like you're just regrouping, trying to work out what's going on and what to do next.
Where we go, how, I mean, there was talk of, right, we're just going to go home, give up, or do we go to a pub and sort of have a chat?
Yeah.
What do we do? And it was suddenly, right, move on, go away again. And at that point, we were trying to work out where the people had been taken, where the arrests were going to be processed. And as it turned out, of all places, it was going to be Charing Cross Police Station in central London. Well, from Tooting, that's quite a way. I mean, that's by road now 35-40 minutes in the traffic. So why were they taken there?
Odd.
Very odd. Well, what they didn't account for or reckon on was the fact that there was a double-decker Routemaster bus and a whole load of protesters that were very upset that their friends had been treated in this way.
This is the famous anti-ULEZ double-decker.
It is. It stopped the ULEZ bus, the party bus, and everyone jumped on that. Other people followed with vehicles, and some people went on the train, got public transport to turn up later, and basically went to Charing Cross Police Station and protested outside. And once again, initially there was a, right, you can't do that here, you've got to go away. And when they realised that people weren't going to go away, they weren't going to be told what to do, and the fear and the upset that had been caused, these people weren't angry, they were upset, genuinely upset and fearful for what was happening to their friends inside, concerned for their health, because as we were, no one was told or kept in the loop, so people's partners were trying to get medicine to them.
Yeah.
We were trying to contact other people, people's other half that weren't at the protest, so that they knew that if they needed to get there to try and get them home or get them legal representation or whatever needed to happen, that this could go ahead. And one lady brought her husband's medication. She went home first to get it because she wasn't intending on him not being at home, and he wasn't intending not being at home to take his medication in the evening.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind the arrests were made at about 1:30 in the afternoon, she got back to the police station. It was about 5 o'clock, and they still hadn't been processed. They were still supposedly sat out in the yard or in a van or in holding sort of cells. They hadn't even been booked in, so no one could even tell us whether the people were there or not. They couldn't give us any names. The people that were trying to contact them, the custody suite telephone didn't even work.
This is pretty scary.
It is. It's not things that you expect to happen for peaceful protests. This is something that, if these were hardened criminals and they'd done something really, really bad, you could understand not being told or the process taking longer or whatever. But when they're vulnerable people that have been injured as well, there's a bloke sat there with his hand bleeding, there's other people that have got their health conditions, and as I understand it, only one of them got to actually see anyone of a medical professional.
Wow.
The others had asked to see a doctor. Apparently there wasn't a doctor on site. The best they could do was a nurse. They didn't even get to see the nurse during their whole time there. I mean, they eventually, most of them were released by sort of 10 o'clock. I think the last person came out at 10:15 at night. So the way that they were treated was differently as well. One person got a microwaved meal at some point. The others didn't. Some people got, well, one person, they did get some medical attention, but that was only because other people went into the police station and really kicked up a fuss about it on their behalf.
It's just nuts.
One person had to go in, so as I understand it, with his diabetes, he'd got a monitor that connects to his phone, so it could tell him if he was experiencing a low or a high reading and whether he needed to do something about it. Well, of course, they'd confiscated his phone.
Wow.
So it didn't have the connection to his phone to be able to tell him. But I think there's an inbuilt alarm that would alert him that there's something wrong. And
so again, you've got basic welfare issues are not being met here.
Exactly. There must be procedures that these officers should know that they need to follow. And there's a lot of things that have gone on. It's not just one or two little minor things. These are big problems that could have cost someone their life. I mean, if it hadn't have been for the other protesters that actually went into the reception area of the police station, and one lady really had to vocally make the point to a police officer that if you do not check this person over properly for their diabetes, you could be looking at a death. You are looking at someone's health that it's irreversible. If what happens to him is your responsibility because you haven't looked after him properly while he's in your care, you're going to be answerable to that. And it was probably just about enough to make them think, okay. But at this point, these are elderly, vulnerable people that are no threat, and they've been treated like this.
So when they eventually get out, is anyone charged with anything?
So there were no charges actually made. They were given bail conditions, which was one condition, and it was basically a map with a centred pinpoint that you're not allowed to go near there. So the area of Tooting they were excluded from, and some of them had got cars parked in the road surrounding where the protests were and had said, well, hang on a minute, my car's parked there. Plus they've been dropped off or they're kicked out of a police station
40 minutes from where they started.
Exactly, with no idea of how they're going to get home.
Late at night,
10:15 to put a woman and her dog out on the street.
Wow.
And they weren't even aware that we were there. And this was where the lady with her dog got sent out of a different exit to all of the other people that were released. So they all came out of the front door into the reception. She was sent out of the back of the police station. And she walked out and she decided that I'll collect my thoughts. Who am I going to ring? She heard some chanting around the other side. Walked round. She could have gone without even knowing we were there. she walked round and was so amazed to see that we'd got people there supporting her.
The support was still there.
And this is the thing, we are a close-knit community now. We've made friends through this. People that now look out for each other, and this was where the concern for someone on the floor, it wasn't just, oh, that's a person that's here with us. This is, I know that person by name, I'm concerned for them. And so she came round, and eventually one by one all the people were released, and there were no charges. The allegation has been made that people were blocking the highway,
right,
and that an emergency vehicle was trying to get through.
Really?
It's been said that it was a fire engine. Now, there's enough footage.
Oh, there's enough footage.
That there is no chance
there's no way
that there was a fire engine there. The only fire engine that was there was the 1936 vintage Fordson fire engine. That's an anti-ULEZ fire engine. That's brought by one of our die-hard anti-ULEZ protesters.
I've seen it. It's at the protest. You've got that and the Routemaster bus and you know, the Cavalier
vans. There's a lot of different people that I mean, there's a lot of classics that are technically exempt from ULEZ. They come along as well. And I mean, the 1936 Fordson fire engine doesn't pay ULEZ because it's exempt for being age exempt. But that was the only fire engine that we saw all day there.
Wow.
So that's a made-up claim.
So we got a peaceful protest where the police go in heavy-handed and arrest 5 people and they don't charge them with anything. What's next? Because it now seems to me like that basically says that the police are happy to use underhand and overzealous and over-aggressive tactics to disperse peaceful, normal people. Where do you go from here?
Well, only, I believe it was day before yesterday in Southall, there was a celebration for the end of Eid. Now, that turned into fighting or projectiles being thrown at the police. How many arrests do you think actually were made?
Pretty sure I heard that the police backed off and didn't arrest anyone.
I think there was one arrest made, and as I understand it, it was one 15-year-old that was arrested in connection. And the police have claimed that it was peaceful protests. Well, or peaceful rioting is actually the word. Well, how can you riot peacefully?
I've never seen footage of a peaceful riot.
So our protest was peaceful. There's people stood with placards and banners. Nothing was thrown, nothing's getting chucked at the police. The police haven't had to retreat and go and get their riot gear, whereas they went and got suited up for rioting, apparently, in Southall. And things are being damaged, people are actually in fear, yet you've got something else going on that's completely disproportionate with the level of force that's shown.
So certain communities and certain people are allowed to protest violently and riotously about certain things, but certain people in certain communities are not allowed to protest peacefully about certain things. It's almost like there's an agenda being pushed for an end.
If it doesn't fit the narrative, you're silenced. And that's what's happening. I mean, just look at the mainstream media blackout on this, that it's not out there. I mean, if this was, I don't know, let's say a group of people, for instance, as you say, Just Stop Oil can sit in the road, they can stop ambulances getting through, they can stop people getting to funerals,
and the police will stand by and say, well, they're exercising their right to peaceful protest and we can't do anything.
They're sat in the road.
And then people get annoyed, go move the protesters out of the way, and they get arrested.
So how is what happened on Saturday?
Where did we get to? I don't know where we got to when my mobile phone overheated from being sat on the dashboard. Let's wrap up. Basically, it seems pretty clear to me that there is now a directive that has come down from on high to quiet these protests, destroy these protests, and don't worry about harming people.
Pretty much.
Get them arrested, keep them in custody for a little bit, shake them up, send them back out.
All it's done is make the people that were involved much more determined. That one of them wasn't going to go to a protest on Tuesday. He took a day off work, he's self-employed, he should have been working. All the others, they've said, this has rallied the troops, as it were. People are more determined that they're not going to stand by and see this happen. They're going to go out and protest more.
Yeah. There's a lot more that we could talk about. The bat box thing is ongoing. Maybe that's a separate video. People are now putting bat boxes up and finding ways.
TFL a headache.
The Blade Runners are chopping down cameras as fast as they're going up. I think we need to just finish up by just reminding people that this is a made-up scheme that's been cooked up to put the cameras up, to trap the people, to get the poor people, to give up the cars, to get you off the road and monitor you constantly.
Yes.
Get yourselves to the protests, get yourselves in the groups, find out what's going on. Anything else to add?
There is going to be a protest that is, as always, peaceful on the 27th of April, which is Trafalgar Square in London. And the other thing is to make sure, I think the days are running out to make sure that you're registered to vote. If you live in the London area and you're eligible to vote, you need to have done it by the 16th of April.
Yep.
For the May the 2nd election. So you need to, if you've got a vote or you know someone that can vote, you need to make sure that they're not voting for Khan.
Yeah.
If they want any form of freedom, Khan is not the person to be voting for. Whatever policies and promises he makes, I mean, one of his main things is the free school meals for children.
Yeah.
If their parents are being charged £12.50 to get them to school,
Don't make any difference,
free school meal's not cutting it, is it?
So, do you want to vote for a hideous human being that clearly hates our culture and our people and has dodgy connections, or do you want someone else? We've got to stop letting these globalist puppets stand in office. You got to get them out.
So he actually wants to go for 24 years as mayor. He wants 6 full terms. 2's been enough to kill London.
Yeah.
The damage he's done.
London is finished.
Yeah. It's
and maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe that's what they wanted.
Well, when people are so controlled, they're financially crippled.
Yeah.
What can you do to stand up to people at that point?
Pretty dangerous though, to push people to the point where they got nothing. Because the man that's got nothing is going to fight pretty hard.
Yeah, got nothing to lose at that point.
Thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Because you've had a couple of hour drive. We've managed to do it here in the baking hot car park of Gloucester.
It's nice to be back in an 850.
Well, this is why I do it. You know, this is why I do what I do. Because at the end of it all, right, I just want to be left alone to enjoy my car and go on a road trip.
Yeah. And
that's it. Just everything.
Which now you can't.
Which it's getting harder and harder to do.
I said this some years ago. So this was coincidentally fighting a low emission zone fine.
Yeah.
For a vehicle that you wouldn't class as a HGV or a heavy goods vehicle. It was a pickup truck.
Yeah.
That he hadn't been into the zone, hadn't been into London for years.
Yeah.
Doesn't go near the place. Dared to go to a business to take a prop shaft.
Yeah.
Entered into what he didn't know was a low emission zone. Got a £250 fine. That would go up to £550 if it wasn't paid instantly.
Yeah.
And I can remember speaking to TFL on the phone and basically saying, I'd driven to Cornwall at this point. I said, am I expected to check every county, every route that I'm going to take as to what clean air zones exist? And TFL are arrogant when you speak to them anyway.
Yeah.
They think they're above the law.
Yeah.
They tell you what you're going to do. And the woman was quite honestly rude. And she laughed and said, well, of course not. That's down to you to know where you're driving and what exists and know the rules of the road. And I said, but these aren't rules of the road. These are being imposed on people. You've taxed your car, you've MOT it, you've insured it. You're free to drive on the highway.
Yeah. You're
not anymore. And this is now becoming an increasingly difficult thing to avoid. You go to Birmingham, you go to Bristol, you go to London. Oxford's got a clean air zone. They're popping up everywhere. Once London's got away with it, they're all following suit. And soon, you could go on one trip and probably end up with 6 fines.
Yeah.
That you will be hounded for.
And we didn't even talk about pay per mile.
Yeah, that's what's coming next. If Khan gets in for another term, pay per mile or a different form of road user charging is what's coming.
With a narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic, egotistical maniac So you wonder why the TfL staff act the way they do, because they work for him.
A lot of them are as bad as he is. You
100%.
Look at the deputy mayors; they've got the same ideas.
I watched a video of one last night, and like the level of arrogance that this person had. So well, you've only got that from one place.
Yes.
This untouchable. I can say anything that I like because I'm untouchable. Well, these people aren't untouchable, and we will hold them to account.
I mean, they were saying when the ULEZ expansion date came in, the wording was something along the lines of, we expect the sting in the tail to disappear. Well, if there's a sting in the tail, there's opposition to it.
They've planned for all this.
You should be listening to these people.
They've planned for all of this, and this is not their final step either. And I think that's the main thing that people need to realise. You know, you come on, well, it's the ULEZ, and we'll get a compliant car, and we'll learn to live with it. Well, it'll be the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing.
Exactly, because I changed a van some years ago because it wasn't low emission zone compliant.
Yeah.
And when I got that van, I said at that point, this is the last time I'm changing the vehicle because I'm told to, and I've stuck by that.
You wait until they start telling you to change your house,
because
they've changed the regulations, to change your insulation in your house, to change your heat pump, to change all this, because the same thing that's going on with the cars is coming for the houses.
Yeah, you've only got, I mean, not to get into a different subject, but you look at the C40 cities stuff, it's written down in print what they want to do.
Oh, it's all there. People just go and look at it.
People don't believe it. They call you mad conspiracy theorists. I mean, this is the thing that's gone on with the whole anti-ULEZ thing throughout, is the way that we've been dismissed,
painted as nutters.
Anything to paint us in a bad light, or basically dismiss us and smear the campaign. Anything that, I mean, Khan himself called the protesters that were outside, once again peacefully protesting, were called far right, COVID deniers, vaccine deniers, conspiracy theorists, and even Tories. They were his words, and you think, how can someone try and dismiss a whole load of people just because they're anti-ULEZ with all of those things?
I've got to either go and have a lie down or start a fire. I'm not sure which I need to do after that. It makes me sick to my stomach.
When you see the plight of genuine people.
Yeah, and I see it in my email inbox, and that's why I'm always happy to make the effort to make sure I can get this on the channel, because I see it in my inbox.
I really appreciate it.
And it's tragic. So, yeah. We need to finish on a high note. We can't just finish on that, can we? What can we look forward to? Well, it was a sunny day. Can you see that? Can you see that line going up ahead of us right there? That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.